Hello and welcome to this video. Now over the years I've been tasked with building several display locos for people and colleagues that have retired from railway service. This 91 on a plinth was the first one I did. And then I did this Deltic for somebody that I'd worked with for a long time, the head codes denoting the years of service in each end. And I've also made these for colleagues who got married as their wedding present, depicting the signal box they both worked in. So I've got to make another one for a colleague that's retiring, so I thought I'd do a video showing you how I do this. So I'm going to be mounting this Lima 37 onto a plinth for a retirement gift, and before anybody says, oh, it's a working loco, it should be. Lima models are very prolific. They are relatively cheap, but they are very well detailed for their age, and they are ideal for this sort of thing. So unboxing this 37, there's a bag in there that's got bits in it that aren't actually relevant to this 37. And also I've now got a spare loco box that I can house a loco in that I bought unboxed. For this sort of project, it's important to get a loco that is in very good external condition. There are a couple of marks on the body shell for this loco, but it is very good, and a quick spruce up will work wonders for that. And a bit pointless you might think, but I'm just testing the chassis now to make sure it works and to make sure it's a complete runner. Because I'm going to be stripping this chassis down to its bare essentials, but it does give me a pool of spares I can use for when I do locos for trash to track, etc. in the future. So I release the pickup bogey there, and then the motor bogey unclips like that. And I set the chassis down, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually strip this down to the very bare essentials. I do have a drawer for Lima motor parts here, so anything I take off this will be going into this tub. And like I said, some people might bemoan the fact that I'm destroying, or stuffing and mounting would be a better phrase, a loco that works. But this is the way I do this, and there's no point in mounting a working loco when I can salvage parts off it for spares. So everything was taken off there. The motor, keeper plate, the brushes and springs have all gone into this tub. And then by releasing the two screws underneath, I'm going to release the motor bogey in its entirety. And that comes away from the bogey frame when both screws have been released. And I'm also going to remove that armature. This brass pickup piece underneath is coming out because sometimes on second-hand models these can be damaged, so that will be a handy spare to have. And I'm also going to remove and keep all the drive gears and hex nuts off the back. So there's the armature. That was pulled out easily. That's just held in place there by the magnet on the front piece. And then using the pair of these tweezers and nose pliers, I'm just going to undo these hex nuts. And then undo them all, and like I said, keep all of the gears, cogs and everything off this motor bogey. These hex nuts are quite valuable spares to have. I've had a few locos in where they've been missing, and you can't actually buy them as spares, so they are handy to have. All the gears just come off the spindles there. You've seen me service locos like this in the past. They're very easy to remove. So look at the amount of fluff and dirt that was wrapped around these spindles of this model. This model's obviously had some use in the past. So I am going to remove all the dirt and grime off the wheels and axles. Although this isn't going to be a working model, I still want it to be nice and clean. And I don't really want any old lubrication clogging up and potentially leaking out onto the base that I'm going to make later on. So now I've removed all that, I'm just going to give this a dusting over with the paintbrush to remove any fibres and dust that's still on it. And then I'm also going to prise that magnet out of the housing, so I've got that as a spare as well. That is held in place with that tiny lug on the top there, so with a flat bladed screwdriver it comes out relatively easily. The wheels are refitted. I fit them back in how they came out. There's not really any way you can do this wrong now. And the bogey frame was given a dusting over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop that large tension lock coupling off the front there. I'm going to snip it off with a pair of side snips as the plastic is quite soft. And then once that has come away, I'm going to just tidy up the faceplate there with a scalpel just to get rid of any excess plastic. Now, I don't advise using a scalpel towards your thumb like I'm doing here. I should have been doing it the other way, so apologies for that. But again, them couplings are kept as spare parts as well. And then the bogey is refitted to the bogey plate and the screws are reinserted. And that is the model pretty much stripped down. Just making sure it's free rolling. I'm not sure why, because it's not going anywhere. And the dummy pickup bogey was treated in the same way. This was stripped down, removing the base keeper plate there to let the wheels out. The brass pickup pieces were kept, and as this was a later model with all-wheel pickup on this, I actually keep that other pickup piece as well. This was again treated the same way as the motor bogey. The coupling was cut off. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually put a M4 nut through the bottom there to hold this in place, and then put a bolt through the top. This is because I'm going to keep all of those bits as spares, so I need a way to fasten these back together. So now that nut and bolt is in place, I just tighten it up with finger pressure for starters. And I just do it there so that the bogey is straight and it is held in position. And then I'm just going to put a small amount of Loctite on that nut thread so that the nut doesn't come loose in later years. Once that's in place, the wheels are reinserted and the wheel keeper plate is then clipped back in place. And that is the dummy bogey all sorted for now. The motor bogey is held in place with its own plastic lugs, so this didn't need any bolts or anything. This was just shoehorned into that gap like I normally do, and then that is the chassis sorted for now. I will be doing some detail painting on it later on, but that is the chassis stripped down. And you can see here just the amount of spares I've got now for restoration of future locos that I might have in. So all is not lost on this project. So the bases I use are these plastic bases off the Great British Railways magazine series that came out several years ago. These bases are moulded in plastic with a moulded track. They don't look much at the moment when they're black plastic, but when they're painted up I think they look quite nice. The only thing I have to do is to shorten them by about 5mm to fit on the bases. The On Your Retirement brass plaque there, this was ordered off eBay and they were ordered and engraved to, they're engraved to order. So when you order them, it takes about 2 weeks, but he does send them off and they're very good quality. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some detail painting and sprucing up of the chassis. The first thing I'm going to do, although it's not to everybody's taste, is I'm going to white wall the tyres, as I want this loco to be in ex-works condition as it is being presented to somebody that's retiring. So I don't want a heavily weathered or gunky loco. This loco will be outshopped in virtually as new condition. So now the wheels are free rolling, all I do is I turn them with my thumb as I paint the rims white with this Revel acrylic white paint. And that doesn't look too bad once all the wheels are done. The next job will be to spruce those axle covers up. They were actually painted yellow when I bought the model, but they've not been done very well. And I've also painted the buffers silver. This is the base for the plinth. This is one of the Loco display cases from Expo, and you can see here that I've actually shortened that base, although it is sticking up slightly because I'd cut it wrong. But joining the two sections again and then using some model filler, that will be left to set and ready to paint later on. On the buffer beam ends, what I've done is I've got some pipes out of the spares box and a pair of snow ploughs, and I've fitted these by drilling holes in the buffer beam and fixing the pipes and coupling with super glue. And I've also fitted those snow ploughs to that cutout in the bogey we made, again using a small amount of Loctite. And the 37 is coming along quite nicely. Here I'm sitting outside as it was summertime when I made this, and I'm painting the base. The base is painted with Revel stone colour, and then the track is picked out with the relevant colours for the sleepers and track. Here's the completed buffer beam ends there. I've done both ends now. And I've also drilled 2 holes in the fuel tank to allow the securing bolts, which are M6 bolts, to go through that into the base plate. So the fully painted base, I put the chassis on the fully painted base, and holding it in place I just use a cordless drill to very gently drill through the plastic. And it is essential that you make sure you are centered with the Loco chassis here. And once the chassis is centered, you just drill a hole through, and these will locate the fixing bolts through the chassis into the base. And once one hole's drilled, I just put the bolt in there to hold it in place to make sure that both holes are in alignment. The bolts are then fitted through from underneath, and they're secured in the top initially with one nut, which is tightened by hand. And although it does look a bit rough at the moment, you won't actually see these when the Loco's in place. And there we go, the chassis sits over those 2 bolts. The nuts hold the bolts in place, and then I'm going to put another couple of nuts in the chassis to hold the chassis on. To fix this base to the wooden display case base, I'm going to use some of this Gorilla epoxy 2-part resin, and then clamp it in place and leave it overnight to thoroughly harden. After mixing it up and clamping it, here we have the base now glued to the wooden base, and the on your retirement brass plaque has now been screwed onto the base, as you can see. The 2 brass screws there are just cosmetic. I do actually glue that in place as well, just for strength. And now the chassis is actually bolted on as well, and I'm going to clip the body shell back on. And you can see we're coming to the end of this build, and it hasn't taken that long on the video, although in reality these take about 2 to 3 weeks to make. This is the tarted up 37 posed on the Garden Railway. This will be the last time it's ever on a railway of any kind, as it's going to be presented as a retirement gift. But I just took these pictures to show how good a Lima 37 can look if detail painting and effort is put in. It just proves that if you want one for your model railway, you don't have to shell out an absolute fortune for one. So back to the base, you can see I've also added a couple of screws through the base there, just to hold everything rock steady, as I don't want anything coming off of this in the future. And the chassis is then put onto the track base, ensuring that all of the wheels are on the rails and in alignment. And then getting 2 of the M6 nuts, I put them on the bolts, initially tightening them by hand, and then using a small ratchet set that I got in one of my Aldi and Lidl videos, just to tighten them up gently. Now you do have to watch it when you do this. You don't want to be bending the plastic of the chassis. You just want to tighten them up gently. You don't want to go too hard, otherwise you will bend the chassis out of place and the body shell will not clip on. So once that's done, the body shell, as I said, was clipped on. And that is a plynthed Loco ready to be presented for a retirement gift. And I personally don't think it looks too bad at all. The chap I did this for had done 32.5 years of service on the railway and was a very good friend of mine. I was even best man at his wedding. And as at this point, I'm hoping that he enjoys this for his retirement present. You can see there I was just lifting it up there just to show you how strong the Loco bond is to the base, and that nothing's going to fall away when I give this. One final polish up of the brass plaque there, and we'll have a look around the display piece, and I hope you'll agree it does look quite nice. And those bolts and screws holding it all together are virtually now invisible. Last but not least is the Perspex cover to go on, and there we have it, one presentation retirement piece for my good friend Simon, who's retiring, as I said, after 32.5 years service. I hope you'll agree with me in the fact that this looks like a very nice piece. I've made several of these in the past, as I showed you at the start, and I just thought I'd do a video on this one to show you what can be done with these models. So now all that's left to do is I leave the lid off there for a day or two, just to make sure that any glue has finally set and that no fumes are still evaporating that could cloud the clear case. And after a couple of days on the desk airing, if you like, the case was fitted, although it's kept loose, and I transported it to the signal box where I presented it to my friend as he came in for his very last night shift. Adding front end detail really has brought this model to life, and you can see the 37 here on the signal box block shelf awaiting collection by its new owner. If you're interested in me making one of these for you, please contact me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com, and I could end up making one if you would like one for yourself. But please be aware the lead time could be 6 to 8 weeks. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.